All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. Now, not too long after we began to digest the news that quarterback Aaron Rodgers would be staying with the Green Bay Packers, the Seattle Seahawks traded nine-time Pro Bowl quarterback Russell Wilson to the Denver Broncos today. Now, in exchange for Wilson, the Seahawks are receiving quarterback Drew Lock, tight end Noah Fant, defensive lineman Shelby Harris, a pair of first round picks, a pair of second round picks, and a fifth round pick, while Denver will receive a fourth round pick from Seattle. Now, this is the end of an era in Seattle as Wilson leaves the Seahawks as their all time leader in passing yards and passing touchdowns, while no other quarterback has started or won more games with the Seahawks than he did. Now, the highlight of Wilson's time in Seattle came back in 2013 as he helped the Seahawks win their first and only Super Bowl championship. But the thing is, this right here has been brewing for a while as we saw the Seahawks flirt with trading Wilson to the Chicago Bears last year before things worked out, so to speak. But the bottom line is the writing was on the wall, the proof is in the pudding. And, you look back at it, and for me, I wasn't surprised about this because going back to the season, I talked about it towards the end of the regular season where I said, hey, John Schneider and Pete Carroll recently received extensions to remain in Seattle. So, with that said, all three of these men could not coexist going forward. And with that said, somebody was going to be expendable, and no owner is going to sit up there and pay a head coach and a general manager to be there, to not be there um, while also employing a quarterback. So, with that said, Russell Wilson in this case became the expendable person. Now, you look at it going forward for the Denver Broncos and going forward for the AFC West, as this division is now littered with Pro Bowl quarterbacks. I'm going to talk about that more in depth in another podcast later this week. But nonetheless, I mean, you just think about it: Mahomes in Kansas City, Herbert with the Chargers, Carr with the Raiders, and now, of course, Russell Wilson in Denver. Now, the Broncos are hopeful that Russell Wilson is going to be what they need to get over the hump and get back to the playoffs for the first time since 2015, which is also their last Super Bowl title. And you have to ask yourself, can Wilson be the Broncos' version of Matthew Stafford or what Peyton Manning was when he came to Denver in 2012? And I want to first focus on the Stafford aspect because it didn't get a lot of fanfare when Stafford was traded from the Detroit Lions to the Los Angeles Rams last year. But of course, at the end of the day, Stafford was a difference for that team as they won their Super Bowl championship. And then, of course, the dynamic of the Denver Broncos changed once Peyton Manning got there in 2012. They were a playoff team in every single year that Peyton was there and made two Super Bowl appearances. And of course, Peyton's last game in the NFL as a quarterback came in Super Bowl number 50 when the Broncos defeated the Carolina Panthers. So, this move, if you're Denver, you're hopeful that Russell Wilson's arrival can get you back to that plateau. And for new Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett, he's hitting the ground running. You go from working with Aaron Rodgers with the Green Bay Packers to now working with Russell Wilson with the Denver Broncos. What more can you ask for? Joe Ellis and George Payton, the guys running the show in this Broncos front office, they made this deal happen, and now they are hopeful that it's going to bring them the results that they want, and of course, first and foremost, getting back to the playoffs, and then ultimately winning a championship. You look at it from the Seattle standpoint, and the Seahawks are clearly now in rebuilding mode, and like I said before, with Pete Carroll and John Schneider recently receiving their extensions, you knew that Wilson's days in Seattle were going to be numbered. And as this rebuild continues for the Seahawks, they're releasing longtime middle linebacker Bobby Wagner, another longtime mainstay. So all of the remnants of that Seahawks championship team now are basically gone. And as this is happening, would the Seahawks also entertain and calls and potentially trade Pro Bowl safety Jamal Adams? I mean, we saw The Seahawks give up a ton to the New York Jets to acquire Adams. They paid him big money. Adams has been hurt, but then on top of that, Adams wants to go someplace where he can win. And obviously, it's not going to happen right now at Seattle. So if you're going to blow this thing up, and start over from scratch, you might as well go out there and see what value that you can get for Jamal Adams before the NFL draft. So now you have the ability, if you're Seattle, to come out there and get players that can come in and potentially have an impact for this year's team, as opposed to potentially having an unhappy camper in Jamal Adams as the 2022 season commences and progresses. So you look at it, I think, to me, I think it would be prudent for the Seahawks to go out there and get that draft capital for Adams. I mean, look at it from the bottom line. They get back some of what they gave up to get him. And ironically, the Seahawks pick that they're getting from the Broncos, they're going to be picking ninth overall. And they're picking right ahead of the Jets, who own the Seahawks first round pick at number 10. So there's a little bit of irony right there. To me, I think this move also changes the dynamic for the first round of the NFL draft from the quarterback position, because now Seattle's back in the top 10, and you have to ask yourself, is Seattle going to be in the mix to take a quarterback early? And there are people out there, and I'll get dive more into this as we get closer to the draft, because I want to talk about the quarterback position soon. But nonetheless, you always know that there are teams out there that are going to possibly take a player, and especially take a quarterback earlier than what people expect to be done. And then that can cause a run on quarterbacks. And I think a potential with the Seahawks now looking for a quarterback could change the dynamic of what a lot of teams are looking to do early on in this draft. And like I said, I'm going to touch on that in the coming days and really break that down. But nonetheless, you ask yourself, what is the legacy for Russell Wilson in Seattle? And the bottom line is Russell Wilson is one of the better players that the Seahawks have ever had. Arguably the best quarterback. When you think about the elite quarterbacks that the Seahawks have had in regards to their organization, you think about Wilson. You also think about Dave Craig, Jim Zorn, and of course Matthew Hasselback. And of course Hasselback and Wilson are the only two Seahawks starting quarterbacks to help the team get to a Super Bowl. And of course, Wilson was the only one who was able to win it. But nonetheless, Wilson helped the Seahawks win a championship. But it's not a situation, and this is not a slight on Russell Wilson in any way, shape, or form. It's a situation where, Wilson didn't have to put the Seahawks on his back to win that game, because you look at it, the Seahawks team was pretty much set up, and they needed a game manager, or they needed a quarterback to not go out there and mess things up from his position. And you look at it, you had prime Marshawn Lynch. You look at that defense from each level. You had the likes of Chris Clemens and Michael Bennett up front. You had a Bobby Wagner. You had a Malcolm Smith at the linebacker position. And of course, the Legion of Boom, Cam Chancellor, Richard Sherman, Earl Thomas, Brandon Browner. We can go down the list of the athletes that were at that position. The wide receiver position was littered as well for the Seahawks. So it was a situation where Wilson didn't have to go out there and be the guy. And fast forwarding to the 2014 season, if the Seahawks had stayed with the recipe as opposed to trying to change the formula, they would have been they would have won the Super Bowl in consecutive years, because again, there was no reason why Russell Wilson should be throwing the football that close to the goal line when you have Marshawn Lynch right there in the backfield. And of course, that specific Seahawks team, that core, never reacted to Pete Carroll and never reacted to Russell Wilson in the same way. So of course, the good part of Russell Wilson and the bad part. And of course, we saw, Russell Wilson, like most quarterbacks do, begin to get the big money. And of course, you can't pay everybody. And then the team around Russell Wilson changed, after those Super Bowl runs. And it was a situation, Russell Wilson showed that, what, he can get a team to the playoffs, but still you need the playmakers around him, and the Seahawks simply didn't have it. And of course, the injury bug began to hit Wilson at this point. But I think you know what? At the end of the day, he is still going to be remembered as one of the greatest to ever do it in the NFL from the Pacific Northwest. And now you ask yourself, who won this trade? And I think short term, I'm going to go Denver because you look at it, they're going to have the opportunity to put the pieces around Russell Wilson from day one. You look at what they have at the wide receiver position, which includes the likes of Jerry Judy. And I think this is definitely going to put, Denver back in the mix to be a playoff team right now. You also, have Von Miller, who was traded by Denver to the Rams and during the regular season. And of course, he helped the Rams win a Super Bowl title. He is teased about on social media about coming back to Denver. Didn't really want to leave Denver in the first place. And now I think this right here might expedite it. Would a Bobby Wagner, take less money now that he's being released to join his former teammate Russell Wilson in Denver? This is what having, quality quarterbacks can do. Veteran players will say, you know what, I'll take a little bit less money to try to go out there and win. So we'll have to wait and see. Long term, I think it potentially could be with Seattle, but at the end of the day, draft picks are like currency. It comes down to what you do with the picks. Yes, the Seahawks are going to have more picks now, but what are you going to do? What type of impact players are you going to be able to find if you're Pete Carroll and John Schneider? So we'll have to wait and see how things work out for the Seahawks. But make no mistake about it, the fortunes of two NFL franchises changed today. Seeing Russell Wilson trade the navy blue in for the orange crush. So we'll have to wait and see how Wilson adapts to that. Um, his hand, Russell Wilson has been dealing with finger injuries. Of course, playing in Seattle in the cold. Now you got to deal with the cold in Denver once again. So let's see how that works out again. But the Broncos needed a quarterback. They got their guy. And let's see how things work out for Wilson and the Broncos going forward. So, folks, that is going to wrap it up. And as always, I want to take this time out to thank you for tuning into the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. I want to take the time out to thank all of you fine folks out there for tuning in. And if you have not already, please feel free to subscribe to this channel. Now, if you are on Twitter, please feel free to follow me at 300 Pounds of Sports. And like I always say, if you follow me, it will be my pleasure to follow you right back. There's also the sports discussion group on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. You can check it out. Drop a line and be a part of one of the better sports debating sites going on social media. So, once again, fine folks, my name is William Martin. I'm signing off, saying take care and have yourselves a wonderful day.